Welcome to The World from A to Z, an independently produced, nonpartisan news show. My name is Carl Azuz. We're jumping right in with some of the results from Tuesday's U.S. presidential election. Here's what we knew and didn't know when we put this show together last night. First, the presidency. Former U.S. President Donald Trump was leading in the results and considered increasingly likely to win a second term in the White House. The counts were not final by the time we finished this show, but he and Vice President Kamala Harris were both on the hunt for the 270 electoral votes needed to win the election. Early projections last night put the Republican former president closer to that number than his Democratic opponent was in the race. And several major media organizations were saying Mr. Trump was likely to win. If the vote is finalized in his favor, he'll become only the second U.S. president to serve two non-consecutive terms, meaning he served one, then another president was elected, then he was elected again. You have to go back to the late 1800s for the last time that happened, and the leader who did it was the 22nd and 24th president, Grover Cleveland. Assuming last night's predictions hold up, Mr. Trump would become the 45th and 47th American president. As expected, the so-called battleground states played a key role in this election. Battlegrounds are states whose results are hard to predict because they don't always favor one party over another. Several of this year's battlegrounds, including Georgia and North Carolina, were projected as Trump victories last night. That was key to the projections that favored him to get to 270 electoral votes. But again, this is the latest information we had after midnight. Some results weren't expected until the wee hours this morning, and we should have many more details for you in tomorrow's show.
Word of knowledge. Which U.S. president was the youngest at the time he took office? Theodore Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Bill Clinton, Ulysses S. Grant. After President William McKinley was assassinated in 1901, his 42-year-old vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, took over as the youngest leader in American history.
Is it constitutional? The U.S. Constitution requires a president to be at least 35 years old and to have lived within the United States for at least 14 years. True or false? This is true. Article 2, Section 1 set the minimum age for a president. U.S. representatives have to be at least 25 and senators must be at least 30. And as far as the election went for the Senate and the House of Representatives, Republicans were on track last night to win control of the Senate. They were projected to have at least a 51-seat majority in the chamber. That means they took control away from Democrats, who currently have a 51-seat majority if you include the 4 independents who vote with them. And for the House of Representatives, we didn't have final figures there, but when we produced this show, Republicans were leading in the number of seats won. They currently have a 220-seat majority over the 212 seats held by Democrats. There are 3 vacancies. For days before the election, polling indicated that Vice President Harris and former President Trump were locked in a dead heat, each of them with the support of 47% of likely voters. It's not an exact science, it's not always accurate, but it can be a useful tool for experts making predictions and campaigns trying to capitalize on their candidates' strengths and their opponents' weaknesses. Hannah Harris has a look at how polling's done.
The polling industry began by using mail and face-to-face interviews. Then it switched to phone calls. Phone polls use a random digit dial system. The first 6 digits are predetermined, and a computer randomly generates the last 4 digits. But many of us don't answer calls from unknown numbers, so pollsters have had to make a lot more phone calls to get enough responses. Online polls are another option. People can choose to take them and do so at their own convenience, but that's a problem because it's not completely random. People are choosing to take the poll, and not everyone has equal access to the internet. So that also skews the results. And how do they know when they have enough responses anyway? Polls require a sample size, a small group of people to represent the whole population. I've got 637 M&Ms here, and as we all know, there are 6 colors. Here's the breakdown. The first sampling problem we have is if our sample size is too small. I've just taken out 14 M&Ms. Let's see what we have. 2 green, 4 yellow, 4 red, 3 orange, 1 brown, and no blue. That doesn't fairly represent the whole. If I ask 10 people who they're going to vote for, it's unlikely that those results will perfectly represent the whole United States. But the more people that I ask, the more my results will represent the whole. Second, the sample size can be too narrow. A poll needs to draw from a random sampling of voters, but that sample needs to fairly represent the whole spectrum of Americans, from all across the country, cities and rural areas, and from a range of ages, ethnic and racial backgrounds, incomes, and political views. The third thing that can go wrong with the poll are the questions themselves. If the questions are biased, they'll affect how people answer. Despite all that can go wrong, polling has actually grown more accurate over the years.
On this date in world history. A couple elections that had an impact on the U.S. Civil War took place on November 6th. The first was in 1860 and included 4 major candidates: John C. Breckinridge, Stephen A. Douglas, John Bell, and the winner, Abraham Lincoln. But there was so much opposition in the South to his election that 7 southern states seceded from the Union before Lincoln was inaugurated the following March, and the Civil War began the next month. In 1861, the Confederate states that had seceded, along with several others that joined them, elected Jefferson Davis as the first and only president of the Confederacy. He ran unopposed for the job and served throughout the war until the Union defeated the Confederacy and its government was dissolved in 1865. Quote, "We will create an opportunity economy where everyone has a chance to compete and a chance to succeed." Quote, "Together, we will restore economic prosperity and opportunity for all Americans." They're saying the same thing, but the first was from the platform of Vice President Harris, and the second was from the platform of former President Trump. And as the economy was the top issue on the minds of voters in the months leading up to the election, it's no surprise both candidates ran on promises to increase opportunities for people to succeed. But some students in Alaska didn't need to wait to see who won or whether new presidential policies would make a difference in their community. They took matters into their own hands to do something that could help someone. And in the process, they showed us that anybody can build something to create a housing opportunity for people in need.
Take a look at a tiny home designed and built entirely by these Alaska 7th and 8th graders.
Anybody can build a house, even kids.
The students from the Anchorage Stream Academy set out on the project last year in an effort to learn about real-world solutions to real-world problems, like homelessness. The cozy dwelling, built for less than $4,000, will eventually be donated to an area church doing a drive to combat the city's housing issue, but in the meantime, these industrious students aren't slowing down.
We're planning on building furniture as one of our next STEM projects, so we can put it in here and make it more livable.
Hopefully we can inspire other people to build houses like this.
Spending a little time out west today, starting in the Centennial State of Colorado. Mrs. Kunzelman's class is here at Walsh Junior High School. The Eagles are flying high in the town of Walsh. Crossing north into the cowboy state of Wyoming, we come to the city of Worland, home of the Braves and Mr. Hart's class. Worland Middle School is watching. And one state west of there is Idaho. Big hello to Mr. Wilding's or Wilding's class at Blackfoot High School. The Broncos are roaming the city of Blackfoot in the Gem State. Penny farthings are awesome. They're Victorian-era bicycles with these giant front wheels, and about 150 years after their heyday, they lined up to ride and race again in the Czech capital. Here's what that looked like, with competitors dressed the part and their riding choreographed to classical music. Amazing. Is this safe? Not as safe as modern bicycles. There are no gears and a longer way to fall. But that didn't stop the Czech Velocipedist Club from putting on a show. I'd give a penny farthing thoughts on how they got Victoria into that. Did someone peddle the idea to them or say, "I must ask you, old boy, if your afternoon is spoke for, or if you're too tired of mountain biking and ready to get the upper foot on something that lets you sit tall, risk a fall, and answer the call to keep a wheel." It certainly gives the chance to look down on others in spin class. Thank you for electing to watch another edition of our show. I'm Carl Azuz, reporting for the world from A to Z, and it means the world to have you along for the ride.